the soft chime above the door was familiar, almost comforting. But today, it felt like an alarm. Jackson Miles stepped into his own general store with the uneasy hesitance of a stranger. For 15 years, this place had been more than just brick and mortar. It had been a living testament to his blood, sweat, and sleepless nights. But now, wrapped in a faded gray hoodie that smelled faintly of mothballs and a ball cap pulled low enough to shadow his eyes, Jackson felt like an outsider in the world he had built from nothing. He paused just inside the entrance, letting the door sigh shut behind him. The morning sunlight spilled through the wide front windows, casting golden beams across polished floors and perfectly aligned shelves. The store was quiet, humming with the soft rustle of carts and the occasional murmur between customers. It looked normal, comfortably ordinary. But the normalcy was a lie, one that gnawed at the pit of his stomach. Just last night, he'd sat in his home office, drowning in a sea of numbers that refused to make sense. Sales were solid, better than ever on paper, but profits were dissolving into thin air. It was as if money was vanishing between the lines of spreadsheets and stock counts. Someone was siphoning his store from the inside, and Jackson couldn't ignore the sinking suspicion any longer. Probably the economy, his manager had said with a sympathetic shrug, rehearsed concern painted neatly across his features. Everyone's struggling right now, Mr. Miles, but Jackson didn't spend years turning a single rented shelf in a forgotten storage unit into a cornerstone of the community by accepting easy answers. He'd built this store with grit and grit alone. He had missed holidays, birthdays, and sleep. And now, watching everything unravel in silence, it was personal. He moved down the main aisle, his sneakers nearly soundless against the gleaming tiles. Each step was heavy with betrayal and confusion. His eyes scanned every corner, every movement. He wasn't here just to observe inventory. He was here to watch people. His people. Sarah, his lead cashier, was gently training a new employee at the front counter, her voice calm but authoritative, like a mother hen showing a chick the ropes. 5 years she'd worked for him. He'd trusted her with his business, celebrated her promotions, supported her when her son broke his arm. Mike was further down, restocking cereal and making casual small talk with a customer he clearly knew by name. Jackson had once gone to Mike's wedding, slipped an envelope into his hand when times got tough. These weren't just employees. They were family, or at least they had been. But today, the air between them felt thick with something unspoken. Suspicion, maybe. Guilt. Or perhaps it was just Jackson's own doubts echoing back at him, louder than the quiet store around him. He strolled past each aisle, eyes flitting from label to label, but never really seeing them. His memories flooded him, laughing with customers, late-night restocks after storms, community fundraisers in aisle 7. Back then he walked these floors like a proud father. Today, he tiptoed like a ghost. A young mom brushed past him, a toddler babbling excitedly from the cart seat. He instinctively lowered his head. Mrs. Thompson? She came in every Tuesday morning like clockwork. Would she recognize him? For a split second, panic surged in his chest, but she walked by without a second glance, humming softly. Relief washed over him, but it was laced with something darker. The realization that he had become invisible in his own creation. He looked up. The security cameras buzzed overhead, once a symbol of protection, now a grim reminder that even eyes in the sky had failed him. If someone was stealing from him, they had learned how to dance in the shadows of the very systems he'd installed. That meant it wasn't a mistake. It was intentional, calculated, and it wasn't just theft, it was betrayal. This wasn't just about dollars and cents. This was about trust, about legacy, about whether or not everything he'd poured into this place had meant anything at all. Jackson lingered in the cereal aisle, pretending to examine a box of granola, while watching Mike from the corner of his eye. His mind raced, replaying every recent conversation, every minor inconsistency, every late delivery or skewed invoice. His chest tightened. He didn't want to believe it. He couldn't believe it. But sometimes the people closest to you are the ones who know exactly where to twist the knife. The sting of betrayal wasn't a sharp stab. It was a slow, crushing weight that pressed down on Jackson's chest with every step he took through the store. He moved deliberately, weaving through the shelves like any other customer, fingers grazing the edges of displays that once represented his pride. These aisles had once been his kingdom. Now they felt like the backstage of a play he no longer directed. He had picked this specific time of day for a reason. The foot traffic was just enough to blend into, but sparse enough for details not to get lost in the noise. It was the perfect hour for someone who didn't want to be noticed. Still, his breath caught in his throat when a familiar figure passed by. A young mother with a cart brimming with groceries, her toddler cooing and pointing at a cereal box. Jackson instinctively stepped aside, tilting his head downward. It was Mrs. Thompson. Tuesdays were her routine. Would she recognize the man beneath the hoodie and worn sneakers? She didn't. She passed by without hesitation, chatting softly to her child. Relief coursed through Jackson's veins, but so did something colder, sadness. He had become invisible, a ghost haunting the walls he'd built brick by brick. Above him, the once soothing hum of the security cameras now sounded like distant thunder, ominous and useless. If someone was manipulating the system, they had learned to dance through its blind spots. This wasn't about money anymore. This was about something far more personal. It was about the erosion of trust, the unraveling of loyalty, the violation of a bond he had spent years nurturing. Jackson glanced around. Everything looked normal. Shoppers smiled, aisles were clean. The rhythm of commerce hummed as usual. But normal had become a disguise, a mask that hid rot. He made his way to the checkout area, casually positioning himself by the magazine rack. His hands flipped through a gossip tabloid, but his eyes were trained on the registers. He wasn't watching sales. He was watching faces, listening for fractures in the conversations. The store had begun to buzz with its gentle morning rhythm. Barcode beeps, the soft rustle of paper bags, the occasional burst of laughter. But Jackson's ears filtered through the noise, seeking deception. His employees had once called him the ideal boss, hands-off, trusting, kind. They praised his fairness, told him he made the store feel like family. That sentiment now curdled in his gut like spoiled milk. Had his generosity made him blind? Had his loyalty become a weapon used against him? Just as he was about to move on, a familiar voice pierced the background hum. He froze. Magazine forgotten. Mike. That voice was unmistakable. Friendly, confident, with just a hint of swagger. Jackson leaned slightly to his left, peeking through the gap between the candy shelves. There he was. Mike, in his signature red vest, slightly rumpled but confident as ever, ringing up items for a customer Jackson immediately recognized. Danny Martinez. Danny had always shopped during Mike's shifts. Now Jackson understood why. At first, it seemed routine. Premium goods scanned smoothly across the register. Coffee beans, organic cuts of meat, boutique cleaning supplies, all top-margin products. But Jackson's trained eyes caught something others wouldn't. The total on the screen flickered, just for a moment. It had read over $120, but then, like magic, it dropped. Mike announced the new total with ease, $78.50. Jackson's pulse thundered in his ears. His fingers gripped the edges of the magazine tighter. This wasn't an error. This was practiced. This was deliberate. Danny chuckled as he handed over the cash. "These inflation-proof prices keep me coming back, man." Mike smirked. "The special rates are always there for the right people. Old man Miles is too busy counting profits in his office to notice." The words sliced into Jackson like a razor across old wounds. Mike, the man Jackson had once lent thousands to help pay for his mother's surgery. was repaying him with betrayal, mocking the very trust that had built their relationship. The room seemed to tilt. Danny left, whistling, bags swinging from his hands. Jackson barely moved, staring blankly at a rack of chewing gum while his mind spun. How deep did this go? How many others had been in on it? How long had this invisible hemorrhage bled his business dry? The next customer stepped up, an elderly woman Jackson didn't recognize. He watched as Mike's posture shifted. Professional, friendly. No shortcuts this time. The full total rang up properly. The contrast was obvious. They were careful, tactical. The game only played when the player knew the rules. Then came Lisa Chin, owner of the small cafe 3 blocks away. Jackson knew her well. Her basket was filled with expensive baking ingredients. As she smiled and exchanged pleasantries with Mike, Jackson already knew what would happen next. Quick fingers, flickering screen, final price far too low. "You're the best, Mike," Lisa beamed. "The other places charge twice this. I don't know how I'd keep my cafe running without you." Mike winked. "Just keep those muffins coming. And remember, mum's the word." And just like that, Jackson felt his world tilt again, not from anger, but heartbreak. The people he had helped, the ones he had championed, were building their own secret economy under his roof. And they thought he'd never notice. But now, he had. "Boss never checks the system anyway." The words hit Jackson harder than any number on a spreadsheet ever could. Casual, dismissive. As if his role in this store, his very identity, had been reduced to a background figure, a harmless ghost who didn't matter anymore. His chest tightened with each syllable echoing in his mind, pulsing like a warning siren. He forced himself to keep moving, to appear unbothered. But every step he took through his own store felt heavier, more foreign. He drifted toward another register, pretending to inspect a row of canned goods, though his senses were laser-focused on what unfolded around him. It didn't take long for the pattern to repeat. At a different register, with a different employee and a different customer, the same signs emerged, the same carefully timed finger taps on the touchscreen, the same brief flicker in the displayed total, the same charm-laced small talk meant to distract from the quiet theft happening in real time. New players, same game. Jackson's skin prickled with unease. This wasn't just a few bad decisions made by a single person. This was something coordinated, something cancerous. The sunlight pouring in from the storefront no longer felt warm. It felt surgical, like a spotlight exposing the bones beneath the skin. Everything that had once felt like community, the friendly greetings, the efficient service, the polished smiles, now seemed like performance art. How many of these conversations were actually veiled transactions? How much of this normalcy was manufactured? His hand itched to reach for his phone, to pull up the system logs and expose it all right then and there. But he knew better. Any sudden move would be like kicking a hornet's nest. He needed the truth, not panic. Evidence, not suspicion. As he turned toward the back of the store, something caught his eye. Julie, one of the evening shift workers, arriving unusually early. Her walk was brisk, her purse clutched tight. She paused by Mike's register. A small slip of paper exchanged hands. Jackson's gut twisted. Was it a list? A tally? A record of discounts? His mind raced with possibilities. Julie disappeared into the break room, but before Jackson could process it, Sarah appeared. Sarah. Of all the people in this store, she had been his rock. The one he trusted with his inventory systems. The one who had stayed past midnight reorganizing spreadsheets, recalibrating barcodes, balancing chaos. She approached Mike casually, a to-go coffee in one hand, her tone light and familiar. "Busy morning?" she asked, her voice smooth and unbothered. Mike nodded, barely missing a beat. The usual. Mrs. Peterson got her special pricing on that bulk coffee order. And then Sarah said something that froze Jackson to the floor. "Just remember to space out the overrides," she said, her voice soft but sharp. "Too many in a row look suspicious in the system." Her tone dropped lower still. "Don't be too obvious, Mike. Last thing we need is Jackson finding out." The guy trusts us too much. Every fiber in Jackson's body stiffened. His jaw clenched so tight his teeth ached. That wasn't just betrayal. It was conspiracy. It wasn't just theft. It was coordinated, strategic, and built on the foundation of the very trust he had poured into these people. These weren't opportunists. They were architects of a scheme. Then Tom, quiet, dependable Tom from the stockroom, joined in like it was just another coffee break. "Speaking of the boss," he said with a smirk, "did you see him trying to review the security footage last week?" Sarah didn't even flinch. "Don't worry," she replied with a casual wave. "I accidentally deleted the backups during system maintenance. Told him it was a glitch. He bought it. He always does." She sipped her coffee, amused by her own manipulation. Jackson felt his heart crack, not just from what he heard, but from how effortlessly they said it. His generosity had become their greatest weapon. The camera malfunctions, the untraceable discounts, the strange inconsistencies in shrinkage. All carefully designed, not to evade him, but to exploit his belief in them. And then a new thread unraveled before him. "Hey, Sarah," came a young voice. "Jake, the new hire, barely out of high school. Some of my buddies were asking if they could get that special discount too." Jackson's breath caught. He leaned in closer without moving. This was it. Would they recruit him? Would they infect someone new? Sarah's demeanor shifted. Her warmth dimmed. Her eyes scanned the store before she answered. "Listen, Jake," she said coolly, "that's not something we talk about out here, but since you asked, come find me after your shift. We'll go over the customer service techniques." The message was clear. They weren't just stealing anymore. They were expanding, teaching the next generation how to cheat the system, his system. A culture of corruption had taken root, nurtured in his absence, protected by silence. Just then, Julie returned from the break room, clipboard in hand. "Hey, Sarah," she called. "Need your sign-off on yesterday's adjustments. We had a lot of damaged goods to write off." Without hesitation, Sarah scrawled her signature across the page, not even glancing at the details. "Just make sure the numbers match what we reported," she said. "We can't afford any discrepancies." It was efficient. It was polished. It was horrifying. Jackson's stomach churned. They weren't just lying. They were crafting an alternate reality. One where theft looked like shrinkage, manipulation wore a smile, and betrayal came with a hug. He stood there, motionless near the magazine rack, seeing his world with new eyes. This wasn't a few bad actors. This was a network, and the deeper he looked, the darker it got. Subtle glances, avoided eye contact. The way some employees nodded slightly as they passed Mike or Sarah, like soldiers acknowledging a superior. There was a hierarchy in place, silent but powerful. A second business thriving beneath the first. Jackson wasn't just losing money. He was losing the soul of everything he had built, everything he had poured into this store. His values, his sacrifices, his belief in people, now felt like a cruel joke. The foundation he thought he'd built on loyalty and honesty was nothing more than sand disguised as stone. And yet, despite the fire burning in his chest, Jackson couldn't act. Not yet. He needed to be certain. He needed undeniable proof, not just to confront them, but to make sure they could never deny what they'd done. As the minutes passed and morning settled into its usual rhythm, the store's surface remained polished and bright. But now Jackson saw what lay beneath. What once looked like the hum of a healthy business now resembled a living organism infected from within. Some employees moved like they were just doing their jobs, but others, those with the practiced eyes, the rehearsed smiles, they were orchestrating something far more sinister. And then, he heard it. Sarah's voice, again. She stood near the customer service counter, phone tucked between her ear and shoulder, speaking in what she clearly thought was a private moment. Her words peeled the last layer of doubt from Jackson's mind. "Yeah, "It's all set," she said with casual confidence. "Tuesday and Thursday mornings are still clean. Camera blind spots haven't been flagged. Told you, Jackson's not checking. We've got at least one more month to move what we need." She laughed, light, amused, like it was all a harmless game. Jackson's hand curled around the shelf beside him. This wasn't petty theft. This was a logistical operation, scheduled like a delivery route, protected by internal sabotage. They had created time windows, controlled surveillance gaps, and manipulated internal systems with precision. He stepped away quietly, retreating to the back of the store, an aisle filled with pet supplies and silence. There, shielded from view, he pulled out his phone and opened the store's back-end management system. Ironically, Sarah had convinced him to upgrade to this platform herself, praising its accuracy and built-in fraud protections. He now understood why. As the system loaded, red flags began popping like flares in a war zone. Clusters of price overrides all pointed to the same pattern. Specific days, same group of employees, eerily consistent customer names. He dove deeper. Premium items. Coffee beans, normally $22.99, routinely discounted to nearly half. Organic meats, marked down nearly 40%. Household goods, accidentally, voided and re-entered at suspiciously low prices. It wasn't just the frequency, it was the variation. The numbers fluctuated just enough to avoid triggering system alerts. Whoever had designed this understood the thresholds. They hadn't just exploited the system, they had built a new one inside it. When Jackson opened the inventory logs, a deeper horror unfolded. Best-selling items like meat and coffee showed consistent sales volume. But the revenue didn't align. Some discounts weren't even recorded. They were disguised as losses, written off as damaged goods, hidden in spreadsheets no one ever questioned. Then came a real-time alert. An inventory adjustment. 24 units of premium coffee beans marked as damaged. Timestamp, 12 minutes ago. He had just watched those exact units get sold. There had been nothing wrong with them, except that they now existed twice. Once in customer bags, once as written-off losses. It was like a magician's trick, except instead of applause, it left him bleeding revenue. He scrolled through months of history, watching the same patterns emerge like ghosts. Security glitches, corrupted footage, missing invoices, deleted backups. And the timeline always aligned with one thing, Sarah's shifts. Then his phone vibrated. A new email. Subject: System update, schedule change. From an unauthorized sender. It was Sarah's work email. She had manually updated the security patch cycle. She was manipulating not just the inventory, but the tools designed to protect it. Jackson's heart pounded. This was no longer a theory. It was war. Opening the scheduling platform, he examined every shift. Mike and Julie always overlapped. Sarah and Tom never worked without one another. Even breaks were staggered, so someone was always near the register. It was like watching a military rotation, each shift planned to maintain control and concealment. Then, a new alert. Live override. Register 3. He looked up. A customer stood at the register, handing over a bulk order. The price total dropped, $100 in seconds. The customer smiled like it was routine. The cashier, Julie, barely reacted. His finger hovered over the alert button. With one tap, he could notify every manager, freeze the system, start locking things down. But he didn't press it. Not yet. They'd bury the evidence, wipe the logs, call it a glitch. He needed the truth to be undeniable. Final. Opening his notes app, Jackson began building the case. Timestamps, transaction IDs, shift overlaps, patterns, errors. Every detail, recorded, saved, duplicated to the cloud. One crack at a time, the foundation of lies began to collapse, on paper first, but soon in person. The next morning came sharp and bright. No disguise today, no hoodie, no silence. Jackson Miles walked into his store in the clothes he'd once worn with pride. A pressed blue dress shirt, leather shoes that echoed against the tile, and a vanilla-colored folder so thick it strained at the seams. He was no longer a ghost. He was the boss. The moment he entered, the energy shifted. The morning crew went still. Sarah looked up from the register, her warm smile automatic, but faltered the moment she saw the folder. "Good morning, Mr. Miles," she said evenly, eyes locked on his every movement. "We weren't expecting you this early." Jackson's voice rang with calm authority. "Emergency staff meeting, main office, 15 minutes. He turned slowly, letting his gaze settle on each of them. "Mike, Julie, Tom, Jake, you're in too." Then to Sarah, "Please finish the handoff at the register and join us." A flicker, a glance exchanged between Mike and Sarah, a tightening of shoulders. They knew something was off. They just didn't know how much he knew. 15 minutes later, they filed into the office, one by one. Sarah came in last, shutting the door behind her. They took their seats around the conference table where they had once shared laughter, holiday snacks, and dreams. Now, it felt like a courtroom. Jackson placed the folder on the table. Then he began, "I built this store on trust, not contracts, not surveillance, trust. I believed that treating people like family could create something more powerful than profit, loyalty." He paused, looked around. "Yesterday, I found out what that trust is worth." Mike paled as Jackson slid a document across the table. A transaction log, highlighted, time-stamped, and matched with Mike's ID badge. "Would anyone like to explain why premium coffee beans are selling at nearly 50% off to selected customers?" Silence. He continued, calm, steady. "Or why those same products are listed as damaged inventory, even though I watch them being sold." Sarah's mask cracked. Just for a second. Her eyes widened as she recognized her own ID on the logs. Julie shifted. Tom looked at the floor like it could save him. Jackson leaned forward. "No takers?" He pulled out another folder. "Fine, let me help you." He began to lay it all out. The fraudulent discounts, the altered inventory, the fake technical glitches, the scheduling patterns, the security overrides. Then, slowly, coldly, he said, "You didn't find the cracks in my system. You created them. You didn't just steal from this store. You turned my trust, my faith, into a weapon. You built an empire of lies under my roof." He turned to Jake, the youngest. His voice softened, but only for a moment. "You were about to be brought in, weren't you? Taught how to cheat before you even finished your training?" Jake swallowed hard. "Mr. Miles, I didn't—" Jackson stood. "Not yet. We're not done." His voice thundered now, not angry, but undeniable. "You didn't just steal from me. You betrayed every principle this store was built on. You made a mockery of loyalty, of integrity, and now you're going to answer for it." The room hung in a breathless silence, the kind that feels thick and heavy, like the air before a storm. Jackson turned his gaze to Sarah, the person he'd trusted most, the one who knew his systems, his rhythms, his blind spots. "You helped design our security protocols," he said, voice low but cutting. "Was that to improve them, or to ensure the loopholes worked in your favor?" Her composure cracked for the first time. "It wasn't like that," she whispered. "We didn't mean—" "Didn't mean what?" Jackson snapped, his voice sharp with years of buried disappointment. "Didn't mean to systematically rob the business that paid for your daughter's braces last year." He turned to Mike, his tone no less severe. "The same business that covered your mother's medical bills when your insurance fell short." Mike's face flushed, a mix of guilt and defiance warring behind his eyes. "We were just helping people out," he muttered. "Times are tough. These corporate prices don't—" "Don't you dare," Jackson barked, his voice booming like thunder. "Don't stand there and try to frame this as charity." He slammed another document on the table. "Or should we talk about the damaged goods that just happened to end up in your trunk after closing time?" Each revelation was a nail driven into the coffin of denial. Screenshots, logs, written confessions. The evidence didn't just whisper the truth, it screamed it. Then came the final page. Jackson laid it gently on the table, a blank police report form. His voice dropped to a chilling calm. Who would like to start explaining? The silence shattered. Jake, young and terrified, broke first. I only did it twice, he choked out, eyes wide with tears. Sarah told me everyone did it, that it was to help friends. His voice dissolved into sobs. That small confession cracked the dam. Julie followed, her voice trembling but resolute. It started with just a few discounts for regulars who couldn't afford things, she said. But it got easier, and the line got blurry. She turned to Jackson, her eyes glassy. I never touched the inventory system, but I knew, and I didn't stop it. Jackson watched the unraveling with a grim heart. Julie and Jake looked like people finally setting down a weight they hadn't realized they were carrying. But Tom sat stiff, arms crossed, jaw clenched, silent, unmoving. And then Sarah spoke. Her voice was brittle, a shadow of the confidence she'd once commanded. We never saw it as stealing, she whispered. They were our neighbors, our friends. Prices kept rising, and we just wanted to help. She paused, a long, broken breath. But we went too far, way too far. Mike, however, refused to bend. His voice rose sharp with resentment. You're making millions while people can't afford groceries. We were evening the playing field. Jackson's reply was precise and lethal. My profits go back into this store, into your paychecks, your bonuses, your safety net. That emergency fund? It paid for your mom's hospital stay, Mike, and you knew that. He leaned forward. But that's not the point. You didn't just steal money. You stole trust. You turned this store into your own little kingdom of lies. He walked to his desk and retrieved a stack of sealed envelopes. I've made my decisions, he said. They're final. He faced Jake first. You're young. You were misled. 2 weeks suspension, mandatory ethics training, 6 months of supervised work. One more mistake, you're gone. Jake nodded rapidly, eyes wet with shame, but also relief. Then Julie, you knew better, but you came clean. 1 month suspension, probation afterward. You'll help implement our new internal controls. She nodded. A quiet thank you caught in her throat. Then came the hammer. Tom, Mike, pack your things. Security will escort you out. Final checks will reflect deductions for provable losses. Tom said nothing. Mike stood, jaw tight, fire still in his eyes. But he didn't speak. He couldn't. There was nothing left to say. And finally, Sarah. The silence was heavier now. You were the architect, Jackson said, voice thick. You built the system you used to steal. You used every bit of access, every ounce of trust I gave you, and you turned it into a weapon. He placed a printed document on the table. I'm not just firing you, I'm pressing charges. Sarah's face drained of color. Jackson, please. No. His voice didn't tremble. Not anymore. This isn't just a policy violation. This is criminal. You'll be hearing from my attorney. As security arrived and began escorting the terminated employees out, Jackson turned to the rest of his staff. Starting tomorrow, he said, this store will operate differently. Every transaction, reviewed, random audits, routine, camera systems, upgraded, access restricted. He paused, scanning each face. But more importantly, this team, this business, it will be built on something deeper than systems or software. He let the silence sit. Trust. The word hung in the air like a solemn vow. It won't come easy. It won't come fast. Some of you will have to earn it back. Others will have to prove you ever deserved it. That afternoon, long after the echoes of the meeting had faded, Jackson sat alone in his office. Papers were stacked on his desk, evidence, reports, decisions, consequences. The sun filtered through the blinds, casting golden streaks across the frame hanging beside him. the first dollar bill the store ever earned. A reminder of a simpler time, before systems, before betrayal. As he walked through the aisles later that day, whispers followed him. Glances turned. Some employees avoided his eyes. Others, surprisingly, met his gaze, ashamed but relieved. The weight of deception had lifted, if only slightly. In the weeks that followed, change swept through the store like a controlled wildfire. New systems, new training, clear policies, and for the first time in years, enforcement. The biggest shift wasn't visible. It was cultural. Gone was the illusion of a family that enabled quiet corruption. In its place, professionalism, standards, boundaries. Customers pushed back when their under-the-table deals dried up. Some left, but most stayed. Some thanked him. Revenue dipped. Then slowly, it rose. 6 months later, Jackson stood at the same office window. The new financial reports lay in front of him, clear, clean, honest. Jake had become one of the most reliable employees on the team. Julie had taken charge of internal audits with a zeal that made Jackson quietly proud. New hires came in, carefully vetted, rigorously trained. But Jackson knew the real change wasn't in the numbers. It was in him. He had learned the cost of trust and the cost of losing it. Sometimes the deepest wounds come from those you believe in the most, and some lessons are written not in ink, but in scars. The store would survive, maybe even thrive, but now it would do so with a kind of wisdom he had earned the hard way, etched not just in receipts and balance sheets, but in the fragile, vital fabric of human connection. He looked again at that framed dollar on the wall, a relic of trust once given freely. Now he knew better. Trust wasn't a gift. It was something you earned, and something worth fighting for.